Under the rosy dawn light of the Arizona desert, Jacob Miller sat quietly on his porch, a warm coffee mug trembling slightly in his hands. At his feet, two faithful companions lay resting, his loyal Anatolian shepherd, Buford, and a soft-spoken tabby cat he named Mia. The morning was cool, the air scented with sagebrush and distant mesquite. Inside the cabin, the cast-iron stove radiated warmth, and Helen, Jacob's wife of 40 years, hummed softly as she poured hot tamales into steaming mugs for his family and grandchildren. 8-year-old Carla and 6-year-old Miguel were still asleep upstairs, unaware of the pink dawn breaking over the mesa. Jacob had lived on this ranch for more than 4 decades, and as he grew older, the quiet companionship of his animals became his greatest treasure. Buford, named after a beloved uncle, was a rugged 130-pound Anatolian Pyrenees with deep brown eyes and a thick coat built for cold desert nights. Even in the early morning light, Buford's alert stance bespoke a guardian's instincts. Jacob remembered how Buford had come to live with him, a stray pup found wandering near the county fair, starving after escaping from a rodeo's petting zoo. He had nursed the pup back to health, and that deep loyalty was in Buford's eyes ever since. Each night, Buford slept inside the cabin now, closer to Jacob's bedside than the stalls or corral. Sometimes Jacob joked that Buford might as well be the one earning his keep, for he guarded the herd and the home tirelessly. Mia, the tabby cat, was a much smaller presence, but equally brave in spirit. A skinny kitten had once appeared at the porch edge one autumn, her green eyes wide and her little body shivering. Helen and the children coaxed Mia inside with bits of chicken, and soon Mia became a fixture of the household. The grandchildren loved to play dress-up with her. They had given her the name Mia, after a cartoon princess, though Jacob secretly thought Mia was a princess of her own. Even Buford treated her gently. Once she had even climbed onto Buford's back to ride for a few steps, and he never shook her off. Mia would often sit on Jacob's lap as he read a morning newspaper, purring contentedly as the sunlight filtered through the porch beams. They were an odd little family, an aging cowboy, a giant guardian dog, and a delicate house cat. Yet the bond between them was very real. Jacob often said that animals didn't judge like people could. They simply gave affection and expected nothing in return. He remembered a story of a heroic Anatolian shepherd named Buford, another Buford by name, who had brought a missing toddler to safety after a night in the wilderness. The child had wandered nearly 7 miles on his own, through canyons and mesquite brush, yet this gentle giant guided the frightened boy home. Deputies later reported that a search helicopter had even spotted mountain lions near where the boy had been walking. But Buford had calmly kept the child safe, never leaving his side. Jacob would joke that if his own Buford ever found one of the grandchildren lost among the scrub, that dog would never leave them. As one rancher later said of that dog, "He loves kids, so I couldn't imagine he wouldn't leave him when he found him." Buford, too, had that kind of loving patience. Mia the cat had her own heroism as well. Jacob recalled how a family once owed their lives to a tabby named Mr. Boo, who sensed a carbon monoxide leak and pestered his owners until they all escaped to safety. One winter night, years ago, Mia showed a similar instinct. Jacob woke to hear frantic meowing downstairs, a sound so urgent it immediately roused him. As Helen opened the kitchen door, a cold hiss of gas greeted them. A cracked stovepipe had begun filling the cabin with fumes. Mia dashed through each room, meowing and scratching at doors until the family finally followed her outside. Moments later, a fire crew arrived to fix the leak. "She was trying to save us, just like that Mr. Boo cat," Jacob had said afterward. Shivering at the memory, Mia, curled up in the warm morning sunshine now, had earned a special place in their hearts that night. On most days, life on the ranch was slow and content. Jacob tended the small herd of cattle, with Buford trotting faithfully beside him, looting calves following in their wake. Mia often stayed on the porch, watching lizards scurry among the rocks or napping in a patch of sun. In the quiet hours, he might read an old Western novel or carve wood just for the fun of it. Carla would often sneak up when he whittled, pretending to count each curl of wood. Miguel practiced tying knots under Jacob's patient guidance. In the kitchen, Helen was busy baking bread or canning tomatoes, and Mia sometimes sampled a spilled crumb, promptly shooed away with a gentle chuckle from Jacob. None of this felt extraordinary, until the extraordinary came. The ranch itself was a patchwork of memories. The red rock cliffs gleamed gold at dusk. One summer, a wild Mustang had galloped by with Buford at its heels, curious but unafraid. A wise old raven called Scout often perched on the fence and seemed to nod in greeting when Jacob walked by. Even the windmill creaked a lullaby that Jacob had learned to hum. The neighbors, fellow ranchers, felt like family too, dropping off fresh eggs or mending a broken fence when they could. At night, Buford would often stand guard on the porch rail, silhouette noble under the moon. Mia sometimes joined him on the railing, her tail flicking playfully. Jacob thought often of the unspoken bond between all living things here. Once, when Jacob had been a young man traveling through town, an old veterinarian told him, "A man is judged by how he treats those who trust him most." He had not forgotten those words. Tonight, he felt he was living proof of them. He took a sip of the hot coffee. It was sweet and a little bitter, just like life here, warm and comforting, but not without challenges. The porch creaked under his rocking chair as he turned slowly to face the rising sun. A thin haze crept across the horizon. He remembered storm warnings the day before. Sure enough, a gentle rumble of thunder in the distance confirmed the dawn would bring rain. He loved these mornings when the air was fresh and everything seemed new. He looked down at Buford. The big dog had one paw laced over the other, like a gentleman waiting patiently. Buford raised an eyebrow, in his own doggy way, as if sensing something was on Jacob's mind. "Don't worry, amigo," Jacob whispered, gently ruffling the fur on his head. Buford licked his face and followed Jacob's gaze out over the fields. Red-tailed hawks circled above. The cattle in the distance lifted their heads to watch. It was a perfect morning, peaceful, wide awake with possibilities. Jacob felt a swell of gratitude to have this scene every day. His life had changed so much in the years since he and Helen first bought this land. But it was good change. He laughed softly to himself. Who would have thought a city kid like him would grow up to be a cowboy? He had earned his spurs long ago. As his mother used to say, a good man always watches over those smaller than him. He was proud of that, even if his knees protested now. "Mornin', campeones," came Helen's voice. She stepped onto the porch carrying a plate of warm tamales she had made. Carla and Miguel followed, still in their pajamas, yawning. The grandchildren clambered into Jacob's lap as he passed around tamales and cocoa. Mia wound around Carla's legs, purring for attention. Buford sat at Jacob's feet, tail wagging in anticipation of any dropped crumb. These small rituals filled Jacob's heart with simple joy. Everything changed that evening. One late summer afternoon, as the sky turned orange and the air smelled of distant rain, Jacob decided to walk the outer fence line to check for any broken wires. He had sprained the same ankle decades ago wrestling a young calf, and the faint ache reminded him that his body was not as strong as it once was. "I'll take it slow," he murmured to Buford, who gave a reassuring woof. "No need to rush, amigo. Buford bounded at his heels, easily matching Jacob's careful steps through the dusty trail. "Be careful, cariño," called Helen from the cabin doorway. In the golden light of late afternoon, she stood framed in the window, one hand resting protectively on Carla's shoulder, who peered out with curious eyes. Miguel stood beside her, his cowboy hat slightly askew from running around. They smiled and waved as Jacob passed by, giving Helen a thumbs up and patting Buford's flank. "I'll be back soon," he shouted, and they waved again, trusting Buford to keep an eye on him. They reached the far end of the fence near a rocky arroyo. Jacob knelt to repair a loose post. Buford sat patiently in the shade, watching the calves graze and occasionally barking softly if one strayed too far. Mia lay in the tall grass, half hidden, her green eyes blinking slowly as she chased shadows. The sky deepened from orange to red. "All right, boy, all done," Jacob said, stretching out with a sigh of relief. He reached out to scratch Buford behind the ears. Mia rose and rubbed against his leg, her purr like a contented motor. "Let's go," Jacob said, still smiling at the simple work completed. But in the next moment, Jacob's foot slipped on a loose stone buried under sagebrush. Pain shot up his leg like lightning. He stumbled and fell hard against the jagged ground, the repaired post clattering to the rocks. Buford yelped and scrambled to his side. Jacob gritted his teeth, trying to ignore the agony. He wrapped an arm instinctively around Buford's neck as the world spun. The smell of crushed sage filled his nostrils. He tried to speak. "I'm okay," he said softly, but only a groan escaped. For a moment the ranch fell silent. Jacob lay on his back, looking up at a purple sky. Stars began to appear, indifferent and distant. His right leg throbbed intensely, bent at a terrible angle. Blood soaked through his pants. The cattle in the distance stopped grazing, uncertain. The crickets grew still, sensing the change. He felt Buford's warm, coarse fur under his hand. The big dog pressed against his shoulder, nuzzling Jacob's neck. "Good boy," Jacob whispered. "Hold on. Help." Understanding something was terribly wrong, Buford finally knew what to do. He pressed his body against Jacob one last time, and then leapt up. After checking that Jacob could still hold his hand, Buford nudged away slowly. The dog turned and ran back along the trail toward the road, his ears flattened. Buford's paws were sure and fast on the rocky path. Though unlit and unfamiliar, he ran without hesitation. He sniffed at every junction, following Jacob's scent, guide-marked on the mesquite thorn. At one point he froze as a pack of coyotes howled in the distance, but they faded away with Buford's low bark, knowing they had no quarrel here. A tumbleweed blew across his path, nearly tripping him, but he leapt over it. By the time Buford reached the ranch road, night had fully arrived. Unusually, a state patrol cruiser was rounding the corner. Perhaps it had been searching for a stray calf or checking the area. Buford sprinted into view and immediately leaped at the passenger door, barking with all the urgency he had. Inside the car, Deputy Hernandez yelped in surprise. Buford ran a circle in front of the cruiser, then trotted off as if leading. Looking back to make sure the officer followed, Hernandez jumped out and grabbed a flashlight. The dog didn't stop for explanation. He bounded ahead and dashed back, his body language clear. Hernandez ran after him, climbing the steep bank toward the arroyo. The headlights suddenly fell on Jacob by the broken fence. Hernandez switched on a powerful light and slammed on the sirens. "He's over here," the officer called out. He found Jacob slumped against a boulder, eyes half open, lips pale. "Jacob, it's Deputy Hernandez," he said, kneeling down. Jacob managed a weak smile. "Buddy, Buford," he muttered. Buford whimpered as he sat beside his master. Hernandez gave Jacob a gentle pat. "You're going to be okay," he promised. He radioed for paramedics. "We have an 84-year-old male down at a ranch. Looks like he fell. Send aid." An ambulance arrived with flashing lights. Paramedics carefully lifted Jacob onto a stretcher, his injured leg splinted in place. Buford sat anxiously, head tilting each time the stretcher jolted a little. Even Mia came out from the porch once she realized a vehicle had pulled up. She sat a few yards away under a juniper, wide-eyed. Buford was allowed into the ambulance. Jacob reached over and stroked the dog's muzzle. "Good boy," he whispered, feeling Buford's wet nose one last time. Mia let out a single low meow as the doors closed behind Jacob. "She knows I'm safe," Jacob thought, as they sped away. Jacob awoke at sunrise to find himself in his own bed, light filtering through the curtains. His leg was heavy, but intact, wrapped in bandages. The first thing he saw was Buford lying on the floor next to him, and Mia perched on the windowsill, chasing a sunbeam with her paw. It took him a moment to realize where he was. At home. He turned his head to see Helen asleep in a recliner, holding Carla on one side and Miguel on the other. They all looked peaceful. Helen stirred and smiled as Jacob opened his eyes. "Buen dia," she whispered, gently stroking his arm. Carla and Miguel beamed and hugged him tightly. "Papa!" they exclaimed in unison. Carla burrowed into his chest, and Miguel bounced onto the bed. Jacob petted Buford and Mia. "Thanks," he murmured, his voice still scratchy. The animals responded instantly. Buford lumbered into the bed and rested his head on Jacob's belly, and Mia flopped onto a pillow, purring. Even here, at sunrise in a quiet room, the family was together and safe. Helen came in quietly with a tray of breakfast, atole, spiced corn drink, and tamales. "Eat up, hero," she said softly, setting the tray on his lap. Jacob smiled, as the warm food did wonders for his stomach. Hernandez and the other neighbors came by, one by one, with hugs and jokes. "I owe you my life, boy," Jacob told Buford between bites. Buford's tail thumped against the mattress. Later. Jacob thumbed through a local newspaper on his phone. An article caught his eye. "Faithful dog leads police to injured rancher." It quoted a sheriff's captain praising a dog. "We credit the dog for saving his life that day. The loyalty and heroism of our furry friends never cease to amaze us." Jacob nodded to himself. Those words had been written about a rescue dog named Gita on the other side of the country, but they felt true in his heart. As the day warmed, Jacob walked gingerly outside with help. He sat on the porch in a rocking chair, Buford at his feet and Mia nestled in his lap as Helen brought out lemonade and more snacks. Rain had started falling, drumming on the tin roof. The sky was a bright steel gray, and a rainbow stretched over the mesa. "Sign of good luck," Helen said, squeezing Jacob's hand. It felt right. Across the porch, Carla ran her fingers through Mia's fur while Miguel gently scratched Buford's behind the ears. "You're the best dog ever," Carla told Buford. "And Mia, you saved us too," Miguel added as Mia purred. Jacob smiled, the gratitude for these two unable to fit in words. He looked at Helen and the kids, then down at his brave pets. "I love you all," he whispered to the wind. Weeks later, the ranch had recovered its ordinary routines, but everyone remembered what happened. Jacob used a cane while healing, and Buford and Mia took longer walks with him. A sturdy rope ladder had been attached at the bottom of the Arroyo Trail, just in case. The children still came to the porch each morning to crawl onto his lap for a story, just as Mia would. Family pictures slowly filled the mantel. One showed Miguel perched on Buford's broad back, both decorated in birthday party hats. Another had Carla cuddling Mia as she read a book. Jacob himself grew older and wiser with each sunset, but there was a youthful light in his eyes, a renewed compassion in his heart. Each night he thanked them silently. Gracias, Buford. Gracias, Mia. He honored their friendship by caring for them as they had cared for him. Rain or shine, summer or winter, they never failed him. And under the wide Arizona sky, in the gentle light of each new dawn, Jacob carried forward the simple truth he knew in his bones. Loyalty and love between humans and animals are powerful enough to guide anyone home. In the soft morning light, with Buford by his side and Mia at his feet, Jacob truly felt at peace, never alone again.